educated women over 40, suicidal poets, fat Midwestern fathers, kids with diabetes, Pentecostal preachers, mothers under 20, interracial couples, atheist professors, government employees, xenophobes and racists, private aviators. Everyone will see it. Every demographic. Think about it this way. Guided evolution. This will be a new breed. Cutting edge but classic. Fully complementary. Bold and self-sufficient. Symbolizing freedom and, of course, their product. When the logo is finished, then we will unveil it. 7 billion people. Instantly enlightened. Everyone's rebranded. All the fighting's over. Say goodbye to conflict. That design's rejected. There's no longer language, only recognition. There's no longer country, only corporate colors. Color makes us hungry. Hunger makes us human. Everyone can see it. Everything's connected. Redesign your logo. Give us all your money. Redesign your logo. Give us all your money. Redesign your logo. Give us all your money. Redesign your logo. Give us all your money.
Hello. Hi, chat. How are we doing today? Today's been an interesting one for me. I wouldn't say uneventful. Well, near the end of it was more eventful. I made an appointment last week to get a change in jewelry of my eyebrow piercing, and I forgot that it was yesterday instead of today. What? And so I kind of got a bit paranoid that because I didn't that I had to reschedule for another week, that it was gonna for some reason get infected. It's not. I asked somebody else that also has an eyebrow piercing. It's not gonna get infected. I will be fine. I have like a teensy, very, very teensy-weensy headache. So, but I'm sure it'll go away if I drink more water. So we'll be fine. Also, I'm really sorry if you get like a shit ton of ads for some reason. I forgot to try and fix that from Twitch being stupid recently. So, I bet it looks cool as hell. Yeah, I think it does. But it was definitely not fun having to walk to the piercing shop, or the tattoo parlor. It's a tattoo parlor / piercing shop. To and from there in the dark by myself. Anyway, and today we're going to be reading chapter 17 of The Stars and Their Children. It's been out for a while. I want to say probably like 2 weeks. but I haven't gone around to reading it yet because I've just been really busy. I've noticed that like I only really have time lately to stream during the weekends. Which is kind of sad, I guess. Like saddening for me because I'm used to streaming a lot more frequently during the week. But now I can only do it once a week. Curse you, college. Alright, let's get this up. There we go. Boop. Also, for some reason it logged me out, and the fill-in thing that I have for like logging in isn't right for some reason, and I didn't have time to fix that. Any Clay stream is a word for me. Aw, cool, thanks. Also, never mind. I answered my own question in my head. We're good. Alright. As always, The Stars and Their Children is written by Bones and the Bees. Amazing, talented author. I've been reading, like, pretty much only her fanfictions. Not every stream, but, like, every fanfiction that I've read, well, almost every fanfiction that I've read on stream has been hers, save for Passerin and Hide and Seek Disco Lights. Alright, let's get into it. Chapter 17, Aching Nostalgia. Summary. After an unexpected revelation from Tommy, Wilbur finds himself dwelling on the past. Trigger warnings for this chapter: drinking alcohol. Be warned, chat. If people drinking alcohol makes you uncomfy, please do what you need to do. Whether it be leaving the stream, turning it on audio only, video, like, whatever it is. Stay safe. Hearts. Days after his talk with Filza, the anger inside of Wilbur didn't go away. It was still there, the water playing out its constant push and pull just under his skin. But it wasn't as powerful as a full storm. The waves were building, but they were waiting for the right reason to crash. Wilbur still had no idea what exactly was going on in his head, but it was settling. Not into something peaceful, but something that was waiting. Dread curled itself around his heart and between his ribs. Or maybe it was anticipation. He wasn't sure how to tell the difference anymore. Either way, Wilbur hated this waiting. He hated watching the days slip by, with nothing to show except for his own shifting mind. Things with Tommy were as tense as ever, and in a way it was like their relationship was the same as the waves building inside of him. All of their interactions had frozen over, and Wilbur either had to wait for the sun to thaw it back into water, or risk taking a step onto it and let himself break through the ice. One day, the ice began to crack. Tommy had been out since that morning, which was their new routine that Wilbur hated. Some days he barely saw Tommy, and while it was better than the two of them outright arguing, the ache in his chest was only growing stronger the longer they went without properly talking. But any attempts at conversation, even casual ones, were frosted over in a way that felt too wrong to try and keep going with. Either way, though, Tommy had been gone that morning, and Wilbur was debating what he wanted to spend his time doing that day. He could go to the library like usual, but then he ran the risk of seeing Technoblade again. He considered asking Jack if there was some place they could just go and hang out, but He didn't want to get him in trouble didn't want him to get in trouble with any of his superiors for slacking off or anything of the sort. If he knew where Amesy was, he could see what they were up to, but he didn't want to bother them if they were busy with their diplomacy work. Of course, there was always the option to go see Philza again, but Wilbur didn't have a reason to see him this time. He didn't have a question or needed his advice. Nothing had changed since that day in his office. So why did he want to see him? Instead of thinking about that too much, Wilbur laid out on his bed, hair still wet from the shower he'd just finished. It was difficult to find such motivation to do anything when your options were so limited, and none of them were going to help improve your current situation. Maybe Wilbur could just sleep. Me. It might waste the day, but it's not like he had anything else he was needed for. He could change out of his day clothes and curl up under the blankets, shutting out the rest of the world and letting his mind go. The door to the room opened, and Wilbur's eyes snapped open. Tommy? Wilbur asked as he sat up. Hey, Tommy greeted, not looking at him as he made his way over to the couch. Were you trying to sleep? Wilbur shook his head. I was considering it, but no, I wasn't. Humming, Tommy settled himself on the far corner of the couch, tucking his knees up to his chest. For a moment, Wilbur wondered if that was it. While he was curious what Tommy had been up to, he was sure the answer was going to be the same as it always was these days. That he was spending time with Technoblade. Wilbur knew he hadn't been training, because Tommy always took a shower immediately after his training sessions to get the sweat off. So they must have just been talking. Wilbur didn't like that, but knew there was nothing he could really say against it without pissing Tommy off. Before Wilbur could consider if he should get up and leave to avoid the awkwardness entirely, Tommy spoke again. Philza summoned me, he announced, his voice flat. And like a switch had been flipped, all the hairs on Wilbur's arms stood up on end. What? He hissed, snapping his head over to Tommy. Why? Did he talk to you? Was it just you and him, or was Technoblade there too? Techno wasn't there, Tommy told him, keeping his eyes fixed on the dead fireplace. He said we hadn't gotten much of a chance to talk one-on-one before, so he just wanted to have a chat. Wilbur narrowed his eyes. He didn't like the sound of this at all. What did you guys talk about? At this, Tommy shrugged. Nothing important. You had an entire one-on-one conversation with Philza. Of course it was important. Wilbur pushed, the roar of the ocean growing louder in his ears. Oh, really? Tommy finally looked at Wilbur, raising a single eyebrow. Wonder what that says about the fact that you talk to Philza alone all the fucking time. We don't talk that often, Wilbur tried to argue. Tommy scoffed. I'm not an idiot, Wilbur. You're seeing Philza nearly every goddamn day, and you don't tell me anything about those conversations. Wilbur clenched his jaw. We don't talk about politics, okay? It's why I haven't brought it up to you. Okay, cool. Well, I didn't talk to Philza about politics either, so it's nothing you need to know. Tommy shot back, and Wilbur heard another crack form in the ice. I mean, why should I bother telling you what's going on with me, when you literally asked to see Philza the other day, and didn't even bring it up to me? Oh, fuck. Who told you about that? Wilbur demanded. Take a wild fucking guess, Tommy snapped, a challenge blazing in his eyes. Taking a moment to think, it wasn't difficult for Wilbur to put the pieces together. "You talked to Philza about me then?" he asked, the razor's edge in his words having dulled. Oh, dulled, never mind. You talked to Philza about me then?" he asked, the razor's edge in his words blah 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 blah. "A bit. But not everything in the world revolves around you, you know," Tommy huffed, leaning back on the couch. Wilbur tried to quell the storm by taking a deep breath through his nose. It did little to help. "What else did you talk about then?" Tommy blinked. "Why did you ask to see Phil's a few days ago?" he deflected. Shit. The way that head jump scared me. I'm sorry. Well, you can't really hear me, can you? I don't know how long the ads are running for. I hope they're not running for long. Shit. If Wilbur told Tommy that he sought Philza out for advice, especially regarding his own mental state, that would spell disaster for the two of them. Tommy had been begging Wilbur to talk to him about what was going on in his head for ages now, but Wilbur hated the idea of putting all of that onto his little brother. If he found out he confided anything at all to Philza instead of him, he had a feeling it wouldn't go over very well. And now it ended pretty quick? Okay, cool. So he kept his mouth shut, narrowing his eyes at Tommy across the room. When Tommy realized that Wilbur wasn't going to answer, he scoffed and shook his head. "Yeah, figured," he muttered, turning away to focus on the hollow pad in his lap. The air crackled between them, tension practically choking Wilbur as Tommy refused to look his way again. It was such a foreign feeling to sit in a room with his little brother but feel completely and utterly alone. There was only a few feet between the bed and the couch, but it felt like an impassable chasm. They were so close yet so far away from each other at the same time. It made the ache in Wilbur's chest unbearable, and he knew he had to get out of there if he wanted to keep the waves from crashing down and drowning both him and Tommy with their force. Pushing to his feet, Wilbur grabbed his coat off the closet door and tossed it over his shoulder. "I'm going out," he said, his voice tight. He waited for Tommy to ask where he was going. Even if it was a bar, but how they weren't telling each other anything anymore, it would be something to show Wilbur that Tommy wanted to know what he was doing, that he still cared. To his disappointment, though, Tommy only hummed. "See you later." Wilbur stormed out of the room before Tommy could see him flinch. Out in the hallway, Jack was waiting by the door as always. Wilbur assumed he'd been the one to escort Tommy to Philza, but lately Jack seemed to hang around Wilbur more than Tommy, and he wasn't sure if that was by orders or by his own choice. As soon as Wilbur left the bedroom, Tommy he turned down the hall, listening to Jack curse as he jumped to his feet to follow him. "Shit, Will, where we going, mate?" Is Philza in his throne room?" Wilbur asked, the deafening roar of the ocean echoing in his ears. He heard Jack stumble behind him, but kept moving forward, not bothering to glance behind as his friend struggled to catch up. Should be? But if you want to see him, you should probably let me ask." "He'll let me in," Wilbur snapped, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "I'm not going away until he does." With that, Jack seemed to understand that now was not the time to try and talk to Wilbur, and shut his mouth as he hurried to keep up. Wilbur's head was racing as he struggled to think through the frustration and anger clouding his thoughts. If Tommy didn't want to tell him what he spoke to Philza about, then Philza was going to have to answer Wilbur's questions, because the two of them had an understanding. Wilbur knew how the Emperor operated now. Tommy didn't have the same familiarity with him. Philza could have threatened or taunted him like he did to Wilbur in the early days of their back and forths. Or maybe it was more manipulation, as if Tommy wasn't already getting fucked up enough from Technoblade's influence. So Wilbur needed to know what they talked about. He wasn't sure why he was so desperate, but if he didn't find out, he would go insane. His footsteps echoed off the stone walls as he approached the doors to the throne room. The guards stiffened at his appearance, their eyes falling to Jack rushing behind him. "I need to speak with the Emperor," Wilbur said to the guards without any kind of preamble. The guard on the right frowned. "Have you requested an audience with His Majesty?" "No, but I'm not requesting shit. I'm going to talk to him, so open the doors," Wilbur demanded, surprised at how steady his voice was despite the maelstrom inside of him. "Prince Orpheus, you can't enter unless His Majesty grants you an audience," the guard pushed. It's giving Karen? Okay. Behind him, Jack said, "Let me just send a message and see if he'll see you." "No!" Wilbur snapped, stepping right up to the doors. "Emperor Philza, we need to talk!" he shouted, bringing a hand up to knock. Before his fist could touch the metal, the guard on the right was grabbing him, and Wilbur yelped as his arm was twisted behind his back. Jack shouted something in protest, but Wilbur barely registered it as he was slammed against the wall, arms pinned and a hand on his neck. "Prince Orpheus, cease now, or I will have to place you under arrest," the guard barked. Wilbur struggled against the guard's grip, pain flashing through his face and arms as he became far too acquainted with the stone wall for his liking. Before he could grunt out a response, though, there was the quiet hiss of the throne room doors opening, followed by, What the fuck is going on here?" Although Wilbur didn't like the fact that relief swept through him hearing Philza's voice, he slumped against the stone all the same. "Your Majesty, the prince was trying— Unhand him right this second," Philza hissed, cutting the guard off. Immediately, the hands holding him against the wall disappeared, and Wilbur nearly collapsed as he took all his own weight again. "Your Majesty, Prince Orpheus was trying to enter the throne room without permission," the guard hastily explained. According to regulation, we're supposed to detain anyone who attempts to see you without your approval unless they are certain ranking." "Oh, for fuck's sake," Philza muttered, and as Wilbur turned back around, he saw the man's wings were stretched out even more than usual. His face then turned to something far more serious as he met the guard's eyes. "From now on, Prince Orpheus doesn't need permission to enter the throne room to speak with me. Do not ever lay your hands on him again unless I order you to. Understood?" The guard, who was now a pale and shaky mess, nodded. I understand. My apologies, Your Majesty." Then they turned to Wilbur and dipped their head in respect. "I'm so sorry for my transgression, Prince Orpheus." Wilbur nodded back, but before he could give a verbal response, Philza was grabbing his arm and tugging him away from the guard. "We'll talk in private," Philza told him. As he was dragged into the throne room, the last thing he saw before the doors slid shut again was Jack's wide-eyed gaze, and the other guards still standing stock still, as if they were frozen in fear. When the doors hissed to close, Phil's let go of his arm, and his wings sagged behind him. "Are you hurt?" was the first thing Philza asked once they were alone. Although his arm ached from being pinned behind his back, otherwise Wilbur felt fine, and shook his head. "No, I'm all right." Nodding, Philza let out a short breath. Good. There was a pause, and then he was lifting his head up again, his wings following the motion. "Now what the fuck were you thinking?" "What was I thinking?" Wilbur asked incredulously, the maelstrom starting up again now that the distraction with the guard was behind him. "Yes, what were you thinking, Orpheus? You stormed up to my door like a child throwing a fucking tantrum and demanded to speak with me while ignoring the warnings from my guards." "I needed to see you," Wilbur said, meeting Phil's stare without flinching, "and I didn't want to have to wait for you to grace me with your presence or whatever the fuck." There was a beat where Philza stared at him, taking measured breaths like he was struggling to hold his temper. Seconds ticked on, and Philza pinched the bridge of his nose before straightening up and meeting Wilbur's gaze again. "All right, fine. What's going on?" he asked, his cool calm having already returned after that brief slip. Hold on. Is there just no... Shit, no, that's not what I want. Is there music playing? Like, is that weird, like, humming noise? The music? No, it's not. There's just random silence throughout this. I hate when that happens. I thought I found a new video to... Yeah, no. I found a new video to, like... And I was like, maybe this one won't have random silence in it. Nope. All good, though. I should probably drink some water, though. You talked to Tommy today. It wasn't a question. Philza didn't seem surprised that Wilbur knew, instead simply nodding as if he'd been asking for confirmation. "Yes, I did." Wilbur narrowed his eyes. "Why? What did you two talk about?" Philza paused, eyes flitting over Wilbur's face as he considered the question. The last tints of annoyance dissipated, with a self-satisfied smirk hinting at the corners of his lips. I assumed Theseus would tell you all about our conversation. Is that not the case?" No, it wasn't the case. But Wilbur didn't want Philza to know that. He didn't want Philza to know how tense things had gotten between the two of them, because if he was aware of just how close they were to falling apart, he would know that all it would take was a single push to get what he wanted. He did, but I want to hear your side of it. The smirk on Philza's face grew wider. You're going to have to get better at lying, Orpheus. I'm not... Wilbur cut himself off, taking an unsteady breath. I just want to know what the fuck you two spoke about. Is that so much to ask? Although Philza seemed like he wanted to push the topic, the smirk still playing at the corners of his lips, after a beat of consideration, he dipped his head. I don't know what you expected me, mate, but I just wanted to see how he was doing. Like I'd fucking believe that. Wilbur spat. Lifting his face again, Philza raised a single pale brow at him. Why is that so unbelievable to you? Because the only reason he'd ask Tommy how he was doing was to try and gain his trust, or get information out of him. Because if he genuinely just wanted to see how he was, that meant he cared about Tommy, and in turn cared about Wilbur, neither of which were true statements. Because all of this was a game to Philza, and Wilbur wasn't ready to bow to a checkmate just yet. That's not how you work, Wilbur said, fighting the urge to twist his fingers into the hem of his coat. If you just wanted to know how Tommy was doing, you'd ask me. But you summoned him specifically. You wanted to get in his head. Despite the accusation, Philza didn't seem the least bit offended as he folded his arms over his chest. Or maybe I just wanted to get a chance to get to know him, to see what he's like when you're not standing at his side. And what do you think of him? Wilbur asked, his voice tight. Philza's smile grew wider. If I'm being honest, I'd have to say he's a lot like you. And that... Wilbur wasn't sure what he'd been expecting Philza to say, but it certainly hadn't been that. He and Tommy weren't alike. Maybe in silly ways, like having similar speaking patterns or enjoying the same foods, but otherwise, Wilbur often thought of himself and his brother as the two separate sides of Eldingbecker. Silsid and Nutsid. Or, wait, Silsid and Nutsid. However you say it, I don't fucking know. Day and night. Light versus dark. Tommy took up space. He was loud and vibrant, and wasn't afraid to make his presence known to an entire room. Wilbur never wanted to take up space. He would try to make himself as unobtrusive as possible, preferring to watch from the sidelines and see what others did when they forgot he was there. While Tommy would say exactly what was on his mind, Wilbur would keep his thoughts to himself. When Tommy gave out his personal name freely and without any weight attached to it, Wilbur guarded his like it was a precious jewel. Tommy was born to rule a planet one day. Wilbur wasn't. He's not, Wilbur choked out, after taking several seconds too long to respond. He's not like me at all. I think you're wrong, Philza shot back. Sure, when you first came here, the two of you seemed as different as could be. He was loud and impulsive. You were quiet and always knew when to pull him back. Sometimes it seemed like he didn't grasp how dire of a situation you were in, while you knew exactly how bad things could go. Pausing, Philza took a step towards him. But as I've gotten to know you, Orpheus, I've come to learn that you and your brother are two sides of the same coin. Wilbur clenched his jaw. Philza was standing right in front of him now, and his wings were relaxed, tail feathers lightly brushing along the floor. For some reason, Wilbur found it easier to stare at his wings instead of his face. It's because Wilbur doesn't like looking people in the eyes. He's autistic. Sorry. Huh. Sometimes people like follow me on my second Twitter account, and I'm just like, how did you come across my page? You don't follow anybody I do. Let's see. There we go. Honestly, I didn't even know you had another one. Yeah. I had to back a while ago. I made this dumb. I made this like follower goal that if I reached 50 followers on my main account, I would shout out my main account on my Stan account, and and yeah. Let's see. Where was I? You're both stubborn. Wait. You're both stubborn, Felza continued after a moment. I swear to God, you're two of the most stubborn fucking royals I've met. And I've been in the politics game for quite a while now. He chuckled at that, like their stubbornness was something amusing to him. You can be just as impulsive as your brother. And your brother can be just as controlled as you. And even though Theseus prefers action to words, he knows how to use his tongue as a weapon, just like you. This made Wilbur frown. What makes you say that? Philza huffed. Let's just say he had some choice words for me during our talk today. Immediately, the instinct to apologize for Tommy rose up inside of Wilbur. It was a routine he was painfully familiar with. Hear someone complain about Tommy cursing them out, come up with an excuse for why he did that, and apologize on his younger brother's behalf. He'd done it plenty of times over the years, and for a moment, this didn't feel any different. His brother had insulted another politician, and now it was Wilbur's job to smooth things over. Except this was Philza. Etiquette had been cast aside long ago, and Wilbur knew he wasn't the type to get offended by a few curses thrown his way. But still, the urge was there, and it was strange how familiar it was. In a way, it made Wilbur's chest ache. Tommy wanted nothing to do with him these days, but Wilbur's first instinct was always going to be to protect his little brother. You're more alike than you realize, Philza then said, startling Wilbur out of his thoughts. Clenching his jaw, Wilbur shook his head. He's better than me. Obviously, he's got some maturing to do, but... He paused, taking an unsteady breath. He's handling this all so much better than I am. The words slipped out without him wanting it to. He winced as soon as he said it, and kept his eyes on Philza's wings, mentally cursing himself for another mistake. But that's what it was, wasn't it? Wilbur kept making mistake after mistake. He couldn't handle his emotions. His mind was a crumbling pillar, and he couldn't hope to traverse the storm constantly raging between his thoughts. And yet, Tommy wasn't falling apart. Not like he was. No. For the first time, Wilbur knew Tommy wasn't looking to him for guidance anymore. He doesn't need me anymore, Wilbur whispered, so low that he wasn't even sure if Philza could hear it. It didn't matter if Philza heard it or not, because it was something Wilbur hadn't realized until he said it out loud. The confession was more for himself than anything else. A mental slap to the face, forcing him to confront what he'd already known was happening, but had refused to acknowledge until now. Tommy going out on his own all the time. Tommy disregarding his advice and pushing for them to consider joining the Empire. Tommy not wanting to tell Wilbur what he spoke to Philza about. none of that would have happened a few months earlier. Because a few months earlier, Tommy needed Wilbur to guide him through all those kinds of things. But now he didn't. Alpheus, are you alright? Blinking, Wilbur realized that he'd zoned out, and Philza had been speaking to him this entire time. What? Philza's brows furrowed, and he reached a hand out, as if to touch Wilbur's face. Without thinking, he stumbled backwards, the ache in his chest making his eyes burn in a way that told him one wrong move would shatter him into a million pieces. Don't touch me! Wilbur snapped, his voice cracking halfway through. His head was spinning again. It hurt. It hurt so badly, it was as if his own head was being split in half. Tommy didn't need him. Tommy didn't need him at all anymore. Wilbur was supposed to protect him, but his efforts to keep him safe had just driven them apart. And now Tommy was growing up, while Wilbur was just making mistake after mistake. He was supposed to be the older one. He was supposed to know what to do, to always be there for Tommy. He was supposed to be his advisor, but in more ways than just political. He was supposed to guide Tommy, shape him into the best version of himself he could possibly be. And here he was, fighting back the urge to let his political rival touch his cheek, because these were the only kind of touches he could get these days. In a way, he felt like a little kid again, wanting to curl up and hide from his responsibilities, from his failures. One of his biggest failures had to be that he wanted to collapse right here and now, because the large, dark wings that were arched above Phil's head again seemed like a great place to hide from the rest of the world. But he couldn't do that. He couldn't fall apart. So he forced himself to take a step back, and then another. He avoided Phil's gaze as he rushed out of the throne room, taking unsteady breaths to try and shove down the burning in his eyes. Jack was waiting outside for him as expected. His brows furrowed when he noticed Wilbur's expression, but didn't ask questions. Instead, he fell into step beside Wilbur and led him away from the throne room with quick but calm steps. "Do you want to go out again?" Jack whispered, once they were away from the guards by the throne room. Wilbur nodded, not trusting himself to speak just yet. Jack hummed, before picking up his pace, and Wilbur let his mind wander as he followed Jack through the palace once again. I need more water, 1 second. There was a soft knocking at his door. Not the proper door to his bedroom, but the door that connected his and Tommy's rooms together. It was late. The only reason Wilbur was still awake was because he'd been reading a book, the soft glow of his hollow pad acting as the sole light source in the room. His eyes ached, but he needed to find out what would happen to the explorer when she got to the tower. He wouldn't be able to sleep if he didn't get to read what she found there. But the knocking startled him out of the story, and he bolted upright in bed, setting aside the hollow pad to rush to the door. "Will?" Tommy's high-pitched voice called out from the other side. Are you awake?" Instead of responding, Wilbur opened the door instead, and saw the silhouette of his little brother standing in front of him. "It's late, Tommy," Wilbur told him, dropping to his knees. "Why are you awake?" "I just..." Tommy paused, sniffling once. "Can I sleep with you?" His voice was broken, Cracks threaded through his words, and Wilbur's eyes widened when he realized what was going on. "You're crying," Wilbur whispered, feeling frozen in place. Blinking a few times, he realized that he could make out tears shimmering against the blue glow of Tommy's freckles. Another sniffle. "I had a nightmare." Oh, Tommy," Wilbur murmured, reaching his arms out and wrapping them around his little brother in the dark. Immediately, Tommy melted into his hold, his small head burrowing against his shoulder and skinny arms threading around his waist as tightly as he could manage. "I had a dream that you were gone," Tommy said as Wilbur picked him up and carried him to his bed. That you left me, and I was searching all over, but I couldn't find you." Setting Tommy down, Wilbur carefully tucked Tommy under the covers before crawling in beside him. As soon as he was in the bed, Tommy pressed himself to Wilbur's front, tucking his head under his chin like he was trying to be as close to his brother as humanly possible. "That's not a very good dream," Wilbur murmured, keeping his voice low so he could hopefully coax Tommy back into sleeping. "Good thing it's not real." "But it could be," Tommy protested, his breath hitching. Hold on, I dropped my pencil. "No, it couldn't," Wilbur reassured him, bringing a hand up to thread his fingers through the 5-year-old's hair. "Because I'd never leave you, Tommy." "You promise?" Wilbur could see Tommy's eyes glittering with unshed tears, illuminated by the glow of both their freckles. "I promise." Tommy considered this for a moment, before his brows furrowed together. "You gotta seal it," he pointed out, pouting now. "Seal it?" Wilbur questioned. "Yeah, you gotta seal the promise so you never break it," Tommy exclaimed. "Here, I can show you." Suddenly, Tommy was shifting in Wilbur's grip, and he loosened his arms as his little brother scooted up against the pillows. He tried not to laugh as Tommy's small hands grabbed his face, tilting his head forward so his nose was pressed against Wilbur's forehead. "I promise I'm never gonna leave you, Wilbur," Tommy told him, before pressing a loud kiss to his forehead. Wilbur was smiling as Tommy scooted back down, burrowing under Wilbur's chin and clutching the front of his sweater. "Now you do it," Tommy instructed. Nodding, Wilbur carefully placed his one free hand on Tommy's cheek, since the other was being pinned under his brother's head. He tilted Tommy's head forward until his nose was brushing against it, and repeated the promise. "I promise I'm never gonna leave you, Tommy. I'll always be here for you," he whispered against Tommy's hairline. Oh, wait, okay, I didn't know how old Tommy was. I just knew he was like a child. So I didn't really change Wilbur's voice that much. Oh well. Then he pressed a kiss to the 5-year-old's forehead, laughing when Tommy giggled against his shirt. "That was a good promise," Tommy said, sounding much more relaxed than he had before. "Now, if you believe my promise, can we go to sleep?" Wilbur asked, his book completely forgotten about. Tommy hummed, his breathing already slowing down. Wilbur took that as a yes, and let his own eyes flutter shut, his nose still buried in Tommy's curls. Oh, fuck. Jack's quiet curse is what startled Wilbur out of his memory and back to the present. He blinked, finding that Jack had led him to a different hallway, but had stopped dead in the middle of it. Narrowing his eyes, Wilbur focused over Jack's head and suddenly understood why he was frozen. At the other end of the hallway, Wilbur made eye contact with Quackity for the first time since their altercation nearly 2 weeks earlier. Unlike before, when the sight of Wilbur would make Quackity grin like a challenge had just been placed in front of him, now he seemed to be at a loss for what to do. The two locked eyes, neither one moving as they stared each other down. Seconds ticked on. Wilbur wondered if this was a battle, and whoever moved first was going to be declared the loser. Maybe Wilbur should have been upset at seeing Quackity again. After all, the last time they'd spoken, he ended up with a black eye. But then again, Wilbur had been the one to start it. He'd shoved Quackity against the wall like he'd lost all control of himself. Wilbur had never been a violent person, but in that moment, something had overtaken him, and it fucked things up for both of them. They were both at fault for what happened, but Quackity had gotten a much more severe warning out of it. In a way, it was almost embarrassing how Wilbur had just been slightly scolded, while Quackity got a death threat for what happened. One second. Just gotta do a couple things. My dad, for context, my dad decided to call me. I'm just clearing out the voicemail notification. There we go. Imagine having a father. Anyway, let's see. Wilbur had never been a violent oh wait, no, I already did that bit. Quackity. Wilbur found himself calling out before he could think twice about it. Immediately, Quackity's dark brows furrowed together, while Jack shot an incredulous look over his shoulder. He seemed like he wasn't sure how to respond, so Wilbur stepped around Jack, gesturing for him to stay back as he walked up to the man, making sure to leave a few feet of distance between them. Hey man, Wilbur said after another moment. It's been a bit since I ran into you. Quackity's eyes narrowed. Yeah, that's for a reason. I'm not looking to get my fucking head cut off. Wilbur winced at the reminder of Technoblade's threat. Yeah, I get that. A beat passed, the awkward air threatening to suffocate them both. If you're looking for an apology or some shit, you're not gonna get it. I'd rather we just stay out of each other's way, okay, Prince Orpheus? Quackity then snapped, glaring at him now. On another day, Wilbur probably would have told him to go fuck himself. Or maybe he would have insulted him, making fun of him for how easily he had withered under Philza and Technoblade's threats. That was what Quackity was expecting of him. That's what Jack was probably expecting too. But this wasn't that day. Instead, This was a day where Wilbur didn't have the energy to insult Quackity for something they were both at fault for. This was a day where he was looking back at all the mistakes he'd made and wallowing in his own self-misery. He was too sad to be angry. That was a new level of pathetic, even for him. I wasn't going to ask for an apology, Wilbur quickly told him, as Jack's gaze burnt holes into the back of his head. Quackity blinked, surprise washing over his face. Then what are you doing? Shit. What was Wilbur doing? His chest still ached from the memory of Tommy's small frame clutching his shirt, and the whispered promises they made to each other in the dark so many years ago. His jaw was still sore from how hard he'd been clenching his teeth, trying to keep himself from breaking down in front of Philza. His eyes still burnt with unshed tears, even though he'd long since gotten past the risk of them falling down his cheeks. He needed a distraction. Something to keep his mind off of the angry 15-year-old waiting in their room, who was only going to be sitting a few feet away from him, but would be impossibly far at the same time. He didn't want to see that foreign anger blazing in his eyes. Didn't want to feel like he was staring at a stranger instead of his own flesh and blood. Looking Quackity up and down, his gaze caught on something in his hands. His fingers were wrapped around the slender neck of a bottle filled with clear liquid, the label on the front written in a language Wilbur wasn't familiar with. But the galactic symbol for alcohol was perfectly visible over the letters. Are you drinking? Wilbur asked, glancing back up at Quackity. Frowning, Quackity turned the bottle around, like he was trying to hide the label even though Wilbur had already seen it. What do you care? Wilbur shrugged. I don't. I'm just curious what you're drinking, since I don't recognize that language. Pausing, Quackity's eyes flickered down to the label. It's Orangicus, one of the languages spoken on Nona. Oh. How did you end up with a bottle of Nonan liquor all the way out here? Wilbur asked, frowning at the bottle. Did you visit there recently? Huffing, Quackity shook his head. Not exactly, but I have my ways. Well, that wasn't ominous at all. What type of liquor is it? Wilbur pushed. It's basically gin. Huh. While Wilbur wasn't exactly a huge fan of gin on its own, he enjoyed it when it was put in mixed drinks. Have you tried the vodka here before? Wilbur found himself asking after another beat of silence. Quackity blinked. Of course I have. It's good shit, but it's pricey right now, so I haven't been able to get myself a bottle in a while. And there it was. An inn that Wilbur hadn't even realized he was looking for. I could get you a bottle if you like, Wilbur said, knowing that all he had to do was call for a servant to bring one up. What? Quackity asked, looking genuinely confused as he narrowed his eyes at Wilbur. What are you getting at here, Prince Orpheus? Do you want me to do something for you? Wilbur shook his head. No, nothing like that. I was just wondering if we could share a drink, that's all. Behind him, he could practically feel Jack stiffen. Oi, what? Orpheus, mate. I don't know if that's a good... Jack, I've got it, Wilbur reassured, holding a hand up to keep Jack back. In front of him, Quackity was full-on scowling at him now. Is this some kind of a fucking game? Because if you try to poison my drink, I'll tell you now that it's not gonna work. I've been poisoned about 6 different times already and it's never stuck. Wilbur blinked. You've been poisoned 6 times? Quackity scoffed. Yes, and that's all the elaboration you're getting. I'm just telling you, whatever weird little plan you have going on in your head right now isn't gonna work. Quackity, there's no plan, Wilbur insisted. If you want to say no, you can. Then I say no, Quackity said. With that, he brushed by Wilbur, knocking their shoulders together and keeping his gin bottle clutched to his chest. Wilbur sighed, the ache in his chest growing stronger as his only promise of a distraction walked away from him, and debated the risk of running into Technoblade again if he went and hid in the library instead. Quackity's footsteps began to fade, but before they disappeared completely, they paused. Wilbur didn't look over his shoulder, but he could feel Quackity staring at him. Silence enveloped the hallway, and Wilbur waited for the question he knew Quackity was going to ask. If you don't want anything from me, and you're not trying to kill me or something, why do you want to have a drink? Quackity then asked, his voice echoing off the walls. Taking an unsteady breath, Wilbur dragged his hands through his hair, letting his shoulders sag with the weight crushing him from above. A distraction, Wilbur admitted, staring at the plain stone wall. I just need a distraction. Another beat. Then... Fucking royals, Quackity muttered, and the footsteps got louder as he walked back over to Wilbur. Fine, we'll have one drink together, Your Highness. But I'm only saying yes because I really want that stupid vodka. Holy shit. Wilbur didn't think that would work. Oh, okay. Wilbur nodded, turning around to see Quackity standing behind him, arms folded over his chest. Wait, hold on. Quackity standing... He turned around to see Quackity standing behind him. If he turned around to face Quackity, wouldn't Quackity be in front of him then? Or is he... Does she mean he was standing behind him before he turned around? I think that's what she meant. Okay. Where do you wanna, My room's not far, Quackity told him, turning on his heel and heading down the hall. And with that, Wilbur began to follow him. As they walked, Wilbur tried to think over why he was going to have drinks with Quackity of all people. He could feel Jack's confusion practically radiating off him in waves, and even if he wanted to give his friend answers, he didn't think he'd be able to. In a strange way, Quackity reminded Wilbur of Schlatt. Not that the two were anything alike, because they really weren't, but the lack of bullshit was the same. Of course, Wilbur was sure the two would absolutely hate each other if they ever met, but he couldn't help but get deja vu as Quackity led Wilbur to his room so he could drown his sorrows in a bottle of vodka. After one turn, they made it to Quackity's room. When Quackity went to open the door, Jack settled himself right behind Wilbur, as if he was preparing to go inside with the two of them. This made Quackity pause. Guards usually don't come into guest rooms, he pointed out, narrowing his eyes at Jack. Jack raised a single eyebrow at Quackity. The last time you two interacted, you gave him a black eye. You're fucking stupid if you think I'm leaving you alone with him. Even though Wilbur doubted that Quackity was going to try anything, considering Phil's and Technoblade's threats to him, Something inside of him still warmed hearing Jack's blatant concern. Before Wilbur could open his mouth to reassure Jack he was fine, Quackity shot back with, "If I had a fucking death wish, sure, I'd use this as a chance to try and get back at him. And then you would run and tell Philza and Technoblade, and I would end up strapped to a goddamn guillotine, which really doesn't sound like a great time for me." Jack blinked. "Well, excuse me for being worried, considering—" "Jack," Wilbur said, cutting him off. "It's fine. Quackity knows he can't do anything to me, so you don't need to worry. I'll be fine." Pausing, Jack's eyes darted between Wilbur and Quackity, as if he was trying to see which one of them would win in a fight, even though they kind of already had the answer to that. After a moment, he sighed and stepped back, although it wasn't difficult for Wilbur to tell that Jack wasn't happy with this latest development. "Fine," he huffed, folding his arms over his chest. "I'll call for the vodka to be brought over. Make sure to shout if he tries anything." Wilbur nodded. "Thanks, Jack." With that, he stepped back so he was leaning against the wall opposite to the door. Taking that as his cue to go ahead, Quackity opened the door to his room and gestured for Wilbur to step inside. Quackity's room, like Schlatt's, had a similar layout to his and Tommy's bedroom. The desk, chairs, bed, and the fireplace were all accounted for. But unlike Wilbur's room, which was almost completely bare of anything outside the base decor despite the several months they'd been living in the palace, this space was filled with stuff. Although stuff was a bit of a vague word to use, Wilbur wasn't sure how else to describe the myriad of items scattered around Quackity's room. There were several metal boxes shoved into corners, the contents inside completely invisible to the naked eye. The desk was littered with coins, expensive liquor bottles, and even pieces of technology that looked completely alien to Wilbur. "Pretty impressive, right?" Quackity drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he set the gin bottle down on the desk next to the other liquor bottles, all of which had labels written in other languages Wilbur wasn't familiar with. "Phil really rolls out the red carpet for me every time I stop by, as I'm sure you can tell. I mean, Tommy and I are staying in a room just like this." Wilbur shrugged, brushing his hand along the back of the couch. "I wouldn't say it's too bad." Quackity rolled his good eye. I know it's not the worst, but I also have a lot more shit I need to store," he said, gesturing to the metal boxes. "I don't think it'd kill him to give me a slightly bigger room than this." Suddenly, he paused, something strange flickering over his face as he turned back to Wilbur. "Wait, did you say that you and Theseus share a room?" Wilbur nodded. "We do." "Are you fucking kidding me? Phil couldn't even stand to give you two your own rooms." "Oh no, that's not it," Wilbur quickly said, shaking his head. "We were offered individual rooms when we first came here, but we chose to share one instead." "Oh. Okay then." Quackity blinked, turning back to the liquor bottles on his desk. "So, while we wait for the vodka, is there anything here you want to try?" The abrupt subject change wasn't subtle, but Wilbur was grateful for it all the same. He glanced at the desk, eyeing the colorful liquids in their crystalline bottles, before his eyes fell on an all-too-familiar label. Rushing over to the desk, Wilbur grabbed the bottle off the table, flipping it over so he could get a better look at the label. His eyes skimmed a familiar alphabet, and he eyed the shimmering golden liquid inside, his chest aching with nostalgia. Blazion, read the label, written in High Eldingvegrian. How the fuck did you get a bottle of blaze wine? Wilbur asked, using the common name for the Eldingvegrian liquor. Surprised by that one, huh? Quackity questioned, smirking at him. I have all kinds of goodies from any planet you can think of. Blaze wine from Eldingvegr, mushroom wine from Kinoko, gin from Nona. I like to try new things, so I keep a collection. But you don't have Zephyr's full vodka? Wilbur questioned, furrowing his brows at Quackity. Quackity shrugged, leaning back against the desk. I mean, I could get it, no problem. I just don't feel like spending the money. Not to mention, you can get vodka that's just as good for way cheaper over on Serenity. How did you get this, though? Wilbur then asked, holding up the Blazion for Quackity to see. Have you had it for a while? Yeah, I think I got it about a year ago, Quackity told him. Disappointment washed over Wilbur at that. He stared at the bottle, running his fingers along the familiar letters and eyeing the way the gold glittered with the blazophane powder floating around inside it. Okay, tell me why it just now clicked in my head that blazophane is probably made from blazes. Like, there's a lot of things in here. Like, there's a lot of things in this story that are tied to, like, Minecraft stuff. Or especially, like, the Origins mod. Like, Enderians and Elytrians and shit. And it just now hit me that blazophane probably has something to do with blazes. I'm a fucking dumbass. Oh, I suppose that makes sense, he muttered, setting the bottle back down on the desk. Quackity straightened up at that, reaching out to take the bottle himself so he could hold it up to the light. Eldingvegr's been on strict lockdown since the invasion, if that's what you're asking, he explained, closing his bad eye to watch the blazophane shimmer. Blazophane is being sent out, but the only ships being let in are Sempi military ships. Great. So nothing has changed. I'm not surprised, Wilbur muttered. There was another tense silence between them. Quackity set the bottle down again, making Wilbur glance up from the table. If you want, we can crack this thing open until the vodka gets here, Quackity offered. Wilbur shook his head. I'd rather not have blaze wine right now. I'm fine with the Nonan gin if that sounds good to you, he said, knowing that such a familiar piece of home right now would send him over the edge. Nodding, Quackity bent down to open up a mini-fridge Wilbur hadn't noticed underneath the desk before. He took out 2 chilled glasses and dropped some ice cubes in there as well, before popping open the top of the gin bottle and filling both the glasses up. Wilbur took the drink with a muttered thanks, wincing at the harsh taste when he had his first sip. Despite the bitterness, though, there was something floral complementing it, and Wilbur moved over to the couch as he downed another large swig. In the back of his mind, he realized he hadn't eaten anything since that morning. Maybe that was for the better. It would get him drunk quicker, and Wilbur really didn't want to be in his own head right now. That is a bad idea! You should have at least eaten something. A few feet away, Quackity was crouched in front of the fireplace, fiddling with the dial to turn it on. Once it was lit, Wilbur leaned back against the cushions, watching the orange flames flicker against Quackity's shimmering tattoos. The ink feathers against his skin danced in the light. It was mesmerizing to watch them ripple and move like they were just as alive as Quackity himself was. Wilbur had no idea what planet did tattoos like that, but he admired whoever the artist was nonetheless. Stepping back from the fireplace, Quackity settled down on the opposite end of the couch from Wilbur. He took a long sip of his own gin, the ice clinking against the sides of his glass as he hummed at the taste. "So," he began after a few beats, "can I ask you something, Orpheus?" Wilbur noticed that Quackity had dropped his title, and while that should have annoyed him, he couldn't bring himself to care that much. After all, he was the one who had asked to share a drink with Quackity in the first place. "Can't promise I'll answer, but sure," Wilbur nodded, taking another sip of his gin. Swirling the gin around in his glass, Quackity was silent for a moment, and Wilbur waited for him to figure out how he wanted to phrase his question. "A few minutes ago, you said that you and Theseus chose to share a room. Is that because you don't trust the Empire?" Wilbur had to suppress a flinch at the question. He'd thought that Quackity's subject change earlier had meant he was going to drop that topic entirely, but it seemed he was actually just waiting for them to get started on their drinks. While Wilbur had no desire to share with Quackity the details of everything they'd gone through on Eldingvegger, he saw no point in denying him an answer outright. It was a fair question, after all, especially regarding the part about if they trusted the Empire or not. "It was a mix of things," Wilbur admitted, the back of his throat warmed by the gin settling into his gut. "In the beginning, it was definitely about trust. When we first arrived here, Phil's and Technoblade weren't exactly welcoming. Not to mention, we'd just escaped a life-or-death situation, so my brother and I weren't very keen on the idea of being separated from each other, even if only to sleep. But you trust the Empire now, though," Quackity pushed. Wilbur took in a measured breath through his nose. "We trust Phil's and Technoblade not to harm us, yes." A pause. "You don't trust either of them with anything else, though?" This almost made Wilbur laugh. "Would you?" he asked, raising an eyebrow at the man. Quackity snorted. "Fair point. If there's one thing I know about Phil and Techno, it's that they know how to get what they want, even if it means playing dirty." He took a long swig of his drink. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Let's see. Alright, sorry about that. I was just cleaning through some Twitter notifications. Let's see. He took a long swig of his drink. I mean, shit, man. If they didn't play dirty sometimes, I wouldn't even be here. Wilbur perked up at this. Up until now, he'd been completely clueless as to what kind of business Quackity did for Phil's and Technoblade. Now that he'd seen the man's personal quarters, he had a better idea what his job might be, but he still wasn't sure. And since Quackity had asked him a personal question, Wilbur thought it was only fair that he'd get one, too. Hold on, more weird silence. Come on. There we go. Hold on, what am I? Oh. Let's see. There we go. What do you even do for Zephyr's Fall? Wilbur asked, dragging a hand through his hair. You show up out of nowhere as soon as the summit ends. You clearly have an important role, given that you work directly with Filza, but no one can tell me what it is you're actually doing. Phil didn't tell you? Quackity asked, a look of genuine surprise flashing across his face. He said you worked in transport, but didn't give me any more details than that. Wilbur explained. Quackity huffed. Well, I don't want to piss him off, so I don't think I'll give you a lot more than what he said. But yeah, transport is certainly a part of it. Wilbur frowned. Transport was a part of what he did, but it wasn't the entirety of it. His eyes darted around the room again. They lingered on the liquor bottles from various planets, the random jewels, the foreign pieces of technology, and of course the large boxes stacked in the corner. Filza's work with Quackity was something he didn't share with a lot of people. That implied there was something taboo there, that if outsiders knew what was going on, there could be consequences. It had to be illegal. Whatever Quackity did, it wasn't within the constraints of galactic law. There could be no other reason for everyone to be so secretive about it. Wilbur's eyes widened as the puzzle pieces fell into place. Illegal transport, random items from all sorts of different planets. Fuck, he even had Blazion, which was extremely expensive and very difficult to find outside of Eltingbecker. You're a smuggler, Wilbur said without thinking. And to Wilbur's surprise, Quackity grinned at this, his gemstone tooth glinting against the light of the fireplace. Well, I can't confirm or deny that, but as long as I have plausible deniability that you figured it out on your own. He trailed off, taking another sip of his drink. Let's just say I have connections to some unregulated trading organizations. The black market, Wilbur realized, his head growing fuzzier the more he sipped on his drink. Holy shit, Filza works with a black market smuggler. Hey, that's not exactly what we have going on, but I can't tell you any more details than what you've already figured out, Quackity said, his voice turning sharp. We have a deal going on. I'm indebted to him, so I work with him to pay him back. Suddenly, Wilbur thought back to the translations he provided for the Themesian text Technoblade had. Text he had no way of getting through legal means, considering Themis strictly forbade any information like that from being taken off planet. Technoblade's voice echoed in his head. We have our ways. Were you the one who got Technoblade those texts from Themis? Wilbur asked, straightening up in his seat. He told you about those? Quackity questioned. Wilbur huffed. I translated parts of those texts for him. At this, Quackity's eyes went wide. It was then Wilbur realized that Quackity might not have been made aware that he and Tommy were half Siren, even though he'd been under the assumption that everyone in the palace knew at this point. After a beat of shocked silence, Quackity's eyes narrowed. He scrutinized Wilbur's face, no doubt searching his features for any sign of his heritage. With a small grin, Wilbur held up his hand to block the light of the fire from hitting his face, casting part of his cheek in shadow. Admittedly, the glow was far more subtle than it would be had they been in proper darkness, but it was enough to show the soft blue emanating off his skin. "You're a fucking siren?" "Hoff," Wilbur clarified, dropping his hand again. "My mother was part of the Thamesian royal family." At this, Quackity let out a high-pitched laugh. "Holy shit! Fuck, man! Wish I'd known that before I punched you. Why didn't you just go tell me to bash my head into a wall or something with your voice?" Fear lanced through Wilbur's heart at this. I don't know how to use my voice, and neither does Tommy." The borderline hysterical smile on Quackity's face disappeared, and Wilbur tried not to shrink back as his eyes narrowed again. Why not? "They don't teach men how to use their voices," Wilbur told him, focusing on his grin. "Not to mention, I don't think half sirens even have the ability to use their voice." Quackity was quiet for a moment at this. Wilbur risked a glance up and saw that he was staring at him, as if he was trying to pick apart Wilbur's brain with his eyes alone. He forced himself to keep a neutral face. There was no way for Quackity to know he was lying. Even if he knew that half sirens actually did have the ability to use their voice, he couldn't prove that Wilbur had been taught how to use his. A few moments passed, the seconds ticking down with painful slowness. Then, Quackity let out a breath and shook his head. "That sucks. To be so close to having a power like that, but so far at the same time." "Yeah," Wilbur agreed, finishing the last of his gin. "It sucks." Another beat passed. Quackity's glass clinked with ice as he finished his own drink as well. "You wouldn't believe how hard it is to smuggle shit off Bemis, though, man," Quackity then said, reaching for the bottle and refilling both his and Wilbur's glasses. "The shit I had to do was insane." Muttering a thanks for the drink, Wilbur's head was sufficiently fuzzy as he glanced up at him. "What did you have to do?" Pausing, Quackity raised an eyebrow at him. "You really want to know?" Grinning again, Wilbur nodded. "Regale me with your smuggling stories, Quackity." And that was all the encouragement Quackity seemed to need. The next few hours were spent in a haze of listening to Quackity talk about his smuggling exploits as they downed the rest of the gin, and then the vodka when it was brought to the room. The fireplace was bright, and the ache inside of Wilbur's chest was dulled by the alcohol. The storm in his mind had quieted, and Wilbur felt more relaxed than he had been in months. His limbs were slack, and his tongue got loose. He laughed at Quackity's wild tales, almost choking on his own drink several times over as he learned more about the man than he ever expected to. It turned out that Quackity had an entire crew he ran his smuggling business with, and they flew from planet to planet, picking up highly illegal packages and moving them from one black market to another. If there was a go-to man in the smuggling industry, it was Quackity. As the evening passed on, though, Wilbur's laughter began to fade. It wasn't for lack of Quackity's stories. He had plenty to tell, and each one was more entertaining than the last. But as Wilbur continued to drink, a deep, bone-chilling sadness rose up inside of him. The heaviness in his mind was only matched by the weight on his shoulders, and he couldn't help but think how much Tommy would love to be here right now. How hard he'd laugh at Quackity's jokes, and how cool he would find the entire business Quackity had found himself in. Quackity seemed to notice Wilbur's somber mood. His own jokes petered out, and the two found themselves in silence for the first time in hours as Wilbur reached to pour himself yet another glass of vodka. "Hey, Orpheus," Quackity said, once Wilbur had finished refilling his glass. "Can I ask you something a bit personal?" "Go for it," Wilbur slurred, slumping back against the couch and nearly spilling his vodka on his shirt. Blinking a few times like he was struggling to get his bearings, Quackity then asked, "Why did you need a distraction tonight?" Wilbur couldn't help but laugh at the question, because he knew it was coming. Of course Quackity would want to know what made him so desperate to get out of his head that he invited the guy who punched him in the face for drinks. It was pathetic, but then again, it's not like he had much of a face to save at this point. "Because I'm sad, Quackity," Wilbur told him, his mind stumbling over his own thoughts. "I realized something today, and it made me really fucking sad." Quackity straightened up. "What did you realize?" A bitter laugh bubbled out of Wilbur's chest. "He doesn't need me anymore," he said, his tongue heavy as the truth slipped off of it. "My little brother doesn't need me because he's grown up. And it makes me really sad because he's too young for that shit." A frown flickered across Quackity's face, but now that the words had started, Wilbur couldn't stop them. "I was supposed to be there for him," Wilbur told him, hiccuping mid-sentence. "I'm his advisor. I'm the one who has to guide him and all that shit. But I suck at it. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and Tommy knows, and he hates me for it." "How do you know he hates you?" Quackity asked, his voice silent, or quiet, sorry. "I mean, maybe he doesn't," Wilbur acquiesced, "but he should. I'm useless to him. I'm supposed to be helping him, but I'm too much of a fucking prick to even do that right." He laughed again, although it sounded more like a strangled sob despite the fact that his eyes were dry. I miss him so much, you know? Which is weird because we're literally sharing a room. I see him every night, but I feel like we're so far apart these days and I hate it. But I'm the one who did that. I drove him away because I don't want him to get dragged down by my shit. "Oh, we can change the subject, man. I didn't mean to bring up... It's my own fault," Wilbur muttered, ignoring Quackity completely now. "I did this. I drove him away and I forced him to grow up. I was trying to protect him. I'm still trying to protect him. But everything's just... I'm so tired and fucking complicated. It's so tiring and fucking complicated. I don't know what the right thing is anymore. I feel like I'm a completely different person than I was when we first got here." From the corner of his eye, Wilbur could see Quackity had grabbed the vodka bottle and was now drinking straight from it. "I practically raised him," Wilbur slurred, his words not even making sense to himself anymore. "He's my baby brother. I've known him since he was born. I feel like he's a complete stranger to me now. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he didn't change. I think I'm the one that's changed." The ache in his chest was unbearable now, having come back with full force with the weight of his admission. He was an idiot for thinking that drinking would help, because now he was just even more sad than he would have been sober. His head was spinning as he thought back to Tommy's cold looks and harsh words. He cringed when he remembered his own sharp voice and the paranoia that clouded every interaction he had. He missed Tommy. He missed Tommy so much, it was like a hole had been carved where his heart should be. and instead of trying to reach out and fix his mistakes, he was drinking himself into stupidity with a man who was the furthest thing from a friend to him. Fuck, he was so pathetic. Quackity did not sign up to be a therapist, you guys. He's so tired. Fair. There we go. That was chapter 17. Good fucking chapter. Great fucking chapter. As always. Bones and the Bees always... like, Bones and the Bees never misses. Whew. Well, I'm tired, and I still have shit to do. So... I'm gonna end the stream here. Let's see. Probably not gonna raid anybody tonight. I will, as always, not sure when I'm gonna be live next. It could be in a few days, could be during the weekend, like it normally is these days. You never know. Alright. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really like reading. I really like reading stories on stream. This is really fun. Alright. See you guys next time.